And hello everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the last sections in the measurement section, or in the measurement module I should say, and part of the kind of the technical thinking of how we're going to go about developing lean systems. As a follow-up from the earlier sections, we kind of break the technical tools into really kind of two main questions, which there's some symmetry there with the structure of the management modules. But basically it falls under tools to measure and tools to improve, which really correlate to understanding and skills. And the reason we do that is when we can put those two things together, that's really what drives an effective lean transformation. So in looking at tools to measure, it's really broken out into the three sections, which is key point indicators, KPIs, yield and defects. That's the previous section. And then the last one is material and information flow, or MiFLOW. And MiFLOW is what we're going to be talking about in today's section. So really the very first question, what is MiFLOW? And at the highest level, in the broadest terms, it's really a representation and an understanding of how the flow of material and the flow of information interact with each other in terms of how that drives the ability of a process to function and how a process actually is laid out and goes from step to step to step, using what triggers, cues, things like that. And really the purpose of it is it's a way to kind of meet and measure and understand the lean capability of a process. So it does a couple different things. Probably the biggest is that it helps to understand and identify problems in the current condition. When we actually start going and observing and looking at what's happening, it's easy to see and document where the issues and the problems are so we understand how to fix them. The second thing is that it helps us create and design a good plan to overcome these problems. Prioritize them, understand what's most important, where the bottlenecks are, things like that. And then the last one, which is also very important, it's great as a management tool, as a coaching and communication tool as well. It helps kind of communicate an image of the process in a chart or a map. So we can see the process, we can show problems visually, and then we can show the evolution and implementation of countermeasures visually over time, which is actually it's a really fantastic tool. So the first thing we'll take a look at is the flow of material, and looking at kind of what MiFLOW reveals in terms of how material moves through a process. And the first thing it'll show, and what we're looking for, is production bottlenecks. So a difference between capacity and demand. Also the types of flow, is it complex or simple? There's an example of that. We can find and see kind of the lot sizes. So, are we producing in batches? Are we conveying things in batches? Are we receiving things from our vendors in batches? Large, small lot sizes, what's that look like? And then the last one there is actual sequencing and timing of how we're producing things. One at a time. Are things in order, out of order? How are we going about producing and creating value for the products that we're working on? So the two different types of material flow that we talked about, they're simple, and all that means visually you can see is it's kind of linear, straight through, process to process to process. A complex flow gets a little bit different. That's where you have upstream and downstream processes that branch into parallel, production paths that kind of crisscross and loop and do different things like that. And complex and simple flow are both viable and acceptable and okay. It's all kind of driven by the business and production need. But it's good to understand what we're working with, what we have, and how it's actually laid out. Just the actual charting and understanding of material flow in and of itself, a lot of times, can reveal the biggest insights to where waste is located currently in the process. So then also kind of looking at identifying where our real bottlenecks are. Not where we think they are, not where someone told us they are, but where are they actually. And to be able to identify that, we really kind of use a pretty simple test. So looking at the processes, the steps of the process that we charted out, in this case it's simple flow, we can measure the cycle time of each step. And in this case, if these cycle times aren't equal, then we're going to end up with the little dashed hats, which is representative for stagnation. And that uneven pace of production that causes that stagnation causes buildup of inventory, in-process stock, half-completed units. One individual that has no work, the other individual has 3 weeks worth of work piled up on them. It's difficult to manage, and it results in a lot of wasted effort and a lot of wasted time. So that's the value in being able to identify where those bottlenecks are. And then kind of the basic concept behind this lean thinking, what we're trying to get across, and this comes out in the philosophy module, is that we want to make sure that our pace of production is equal to our pace of sales. And by matching those two together, it means we're producing exactly what we need in the quantity we need and when we need it. And what that kind of looks like is we can lay out our lines in parallel, or how they're structured. We can match each one of those steps to match the pace of sales. And when we can do that with one-by-one production, we can establish good continuous flow. Right? That's the ideal thinking. That's what we'd like to see when we can lay out our MiFLOW document and chart the flow of material through our process. Now the second half of that is the flow of information. So what MiFLOW shows about that is it's going to give us clues onto what type of information is provided, if there's any, the size and type of information. So is it digital? Is it on a piece of paper? Is it on a napkin? What's it look like? Who's getting it? Where's it going? That kind of ties into the sequencing and timing of information. Does it get there too late, too early, when they need it? What's that look like? Is it in order, out of order? And then the conveyance of it. Does someone deliver it by hand? Is it an email? How are we communicating? That's what we're really looking for. And so when we start looking at how the information moves through the process, that's where we can start finding the different types of problems that come from it. In the case of just the examples that are up there, is it wrong, early, late? Is it the wrong type? Is there no information? But all these things can lead to overproduction. When we don't have good, effective communication and provide information as efficiently and effectively as we provide material, then that overproduction leads to stagnation again, which is in-process stock, buildup of inventory, things like that, which ultimately is waste. And waste is the detriment to efficiency. That's what we're trying to find. That's what we're trying to fix. So kind of looking at a couple steps for how we actually develop one of these charts. Now we kind of understand what it is, what it shows us, why we want to do it. Now how do we actually go about doing it? It's pretty simple actually. The first step is investigating. So we want to actually go and see physically, not rely on what we heard or notes that we'd taken 6 months ago. Let's go and see the true condition right now, and then let's ask questions of the experts. And, use our eyes, our ears, ask questions to understand what's really happening. Where's material going? Where's information going? And then the back half is we want to create a chart to represent the results of that investigation. So it's pretty much a cycle of investigation and documentation, and it is iterative. I think some people make the mistake that you can go do all this at once, and you really can't. You go and kind of work through it step by step by step, filling in the details as you go. Because the more detailed we can make it, the more it's going to tell us about the areas where we can make improvements. So just some quick tips on how to investigate, just kind of things to keep in mind. The number one thing is got to do it personally. Second-hand information, third-hand information, old pictures, old reports is not going to cut it because it's not really going to be truly representative of current condition. Then we also want to look at things from the ideal perspective. We want to try and have an open mind, and what would this look like in a perfect world versus what does this look like right now. Kind of get out of the kind of groupthink of, well, this is just the way it's always been, that's as good as it's going to get. No, let's kind of challenge ourselves to try and think big picture with it. Then we also want to ask the process and not the people. And that's a little misleading and may kind of sound confusing, but really what that means is we don't want to ask somebody and then write down their opinion of what they tell us should be happening. We want to actually find and look and observe what is happening, and that's what we want to document. And that ties in, all of these things tie into finding the true condition. That's our goal here. And the takeaway is we want to go and see it for ourselves to make sure we get the true current condition. Because if we don't start in the right place, we're never going to get to the right place. Then the second side is, okay, well, how do we document? And there's a couple tips for that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to map out our current condition. And I encourage everybody, don't get bogged down in what some of these symbols look like. They're representative of a couple tools that we'll cover in a later section. The key takeaways here are the thinking and the procedure for kind of how we go and create this document. It is a skill, and just like everything else, you kind of got to see it and go do it and practice to kind of get leveled up and get comfortable doing it in a big scale. So for now, we're just going to focus on the thinking behind how we create a MiFLOW map. So the first thing, a couple steps right here, is we would just want to draw out each work process. You can use a box, jot a little note in. That's the easiest way to do it, about what the process is. And then we just want to show visibly with a series of arrows how and where the material flows. We want to show with arrows, again, the dashed arrows, where the information flows. And then the little dashed hats, it's my favorite, is draw in where there's stagnation. So if we go out and we see, if we're in an office, for instance, and team member A has nothing to do and is sitting on the internet, and team member B is backed up with a huge pile of paperwork that they're running way behind trying to get through, that's stagnation. Dashed hat, show us that there's waste there. There's inventory piling up that we can't get processed right there. That's the type of things that we're looking to do. And then here, this is a reference. It's probably best just to use this on the printout, the handout for it. But these are kind of some of the standard symbols that get used. So the different types of arrows for material information, if it's a pull system, computer, the customer, things like that. Some of the other things, Hajunka, some of the pull system terminology, don't get overly overwhelmed with it just yet. We're going to cover some of that stuff in the next section, the actual technical formal tools part of it. We'll cover a little bit of that vocabulary. But for right now, just know that that's there as a reference for when you get started making your first MiFLOW map. So once we've created the current condition, then the next step now is we're going to look at this and we want to identify all the problems. The results of our investigation, the reason we're doing this is to find problems. So being able to find them, now we want to document them. We can use a red stormy cloud if we want, but let's show them on the chart where they actually are. And the takeaway out of this, the key point is, it's not enough to just know that these are happening. We want to understand why they're happening, because we need to know why so we can start coming up with good ideas on how to fix them. So it's important to see it and then understand it. And so when we chart the problems, we just draw them right on the map, right where they occur. So in the case of stagnation, too much inventory. Those push arrows, push system, not good thinking. Overproduction, we've got stuff piling up everywhere, all waste, all problems, all things that we can fix and we want to fix. So now we want to create the ideal condition, right? Let's understand the causes of the problems. And then let's create an ideal condition MiFLOW map that shows those problems changed into good conditions, right? Current condition, ideal condition, so we can start understanding where our gap is. In this case, stormy cloud to happy cloud. So what we really want to do is we want to ask where the waste is, right? That's finding these problems. Where is the waste? And then the answer, this ideal thinking, how should we eliminate that waste? And then let's represent it on the MiFLOW map. So in this case, again, just another sample, and again, don't get overly bogged down, in all the symbols just yet. It's the thinking that we want. We want to create that ideal condition. And so in this case where we had, inventory piling up and stagnation, we want to reduce it by putting in a pull system. If we want to control overproduction by using inventory stores and Kanban. And that pull system on the back half so that the customer is getting their orders right away and we're not pushing stuff into shipping. All these kind of ideal thinking, kind of perfect world solutions is what we want to draw out so we can see where we are now and what we'd like it to be when it's ideal condition. So then those next steps, just like problem solving, just like in kind of management fundamentals, we want to close that gap now between the current that we just went and saw and the ideal that we were just able to create. And to do that, we create an action plan. So we collect all of the problems that we find. We want to prioritize them. What are the most important, top to bottom? Then let's create an action plan. We'll get our team together. We'll figure out who's going to be working on what. The idea out of that action plan, just like the implementation plan from problem solving. What are we going to do? What are the steps? Who's going to do it? And when is it going to be complete? Just like setting a target. By how much? By when? A lot of this thinking comes up again and again and again. And that's why we say the thinking is what's important. And then the key point out of this too is we want to understand how the kaizen is going to change the process and what the benefit's going to be. We need to have that expectation of what we're going to be doing, why we're going to be doing it, and what we expect the results to be so that we can confirm our results. So then here, and that's an iterative process. So we go and see, then we create an ideal condition or some fix for what we think the solution will be. Then we implement the fix. Then we can rechart our current condition, and then we can look at putting more fixes into place, rechart our current condition, confirm our good results. So it's a very iterative process, and you kind of start small, and build up, and build up, and build up, and build up. And I always encourage everyone to start small on the first chart, maybe just one line, maybe a couple workstations, and then as we get more comfortable with it, we can build it out until it can incorporate an entire building, organization, or entire production line, 100 people on one line. You know, they can be as big as they need to be or as small as they need to be. And so that's kind of with that thinking, that's the preface. This is just a quick sample one, showing an entire production line. So you can see the dashed arrows for information, the solid arrows for material. You can see problem issues. You can see problem issues that have been fixed. You can see examples of simple flow and complex flow and all sorts of different signals and triggers, using this to visually represent a production line. But that's kind of what these look like when they're done, and that's how they can kind of be a good communication tool, because you can, at a glance, see what's happening on the floor. You can visualize where the information is, where the material is, and where the trouble spots are. And that's really how we want to measure this too, because this sets us up now for starting to use some of the tools from the next module to fix these trouble spots. And then the last thing, just to cover it one more time in here, in terms of respect for people. In the context of coming up with these MiFLOW maps, we really want to stay focused on the ground up, just like in the philosophy section and the problem solving and management sections. We want to make sure that the team members own their processes so that we can get their expert advice on what's actually going on and what's happening. We can see them working, we can see what they're doing, we can understand what's happening. And then we also want to have them empowered to solve their problems. When we start coming up with these implementation plans and action plans, we need to have our team members engaged and involved so that they can affect that change and sustain that change. And then again, just like in the other modules, the reason we do that is because any organization is going to benefit the most when we leverage the full potential of that human resource to start addressing some of these problems. In this measurement module, we've talked about a couple different methods for being smart about finding our problems, understanding where they really are, identifying the important ones, being able to see what the business need is. Now we want to make sure that while we're doing that, we continue to leverage our human resource to solve them as effectively and quickly and to the greatest effect as we go about doing that. And just like before, kind of the takeaway there, the key idea out of that is using that feedback, that perspective, and that expertise is really, really the meat of how we come up with these sustainable improvements that are effective. And that's why we want to make sure we're engaging our people, especially on a process like making MiFLOW maps, where their expert advice is absolutely critical to getting a good, accurate current condition so that we can be smart and we can make sure we start off on the right foot. So that's the end of this section, and like with everything else, any questions, send them through the website, and we will see everybody for the next section. Thank you.